The Deadpool is the fifth and final film in the Dirty Harry franchise. There's a slew of recognisable actors and another serial killer to stop, but all you really need to know is that this movie has the greatest car chase in cinema history. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
You know, I think teaming up with a Scottish podcast man is a good image for the channel.
Very good, very good. This is a movie podcast. We work our way through movie franchises and themes and maybe like an actor's filmography, something like that. We're working through the Dirty Harry franchise. This is the final film in the Dirty Harry franchise. It is The Deadpool. Not to be confused with the superhero Marvel movie starring Ryan Reynolds, which I'm sure is a problem that this movie has now, is that no one thinks of this when people say Deadpool. But
which is strange because I think it's been a while since I watched it, but I think that in Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool movie, they mention this movie as the inspiration for the character's name. So
did they mention them? I definitely remember them having a Deadpool. I don't remember them mentioning the movie. You may be right. I've only seen it once, so I can't remember. But you know, it is funny. It is funny that the name does come from the same idea as the Deadpool, which is taking bets on who's going to die next, effectively. So. Yeah, we'll start spoiler free as we always do. Obviously, there might be some spoilers for the previous movies, even in the first section, because it's just kind of natural to have to maybe bring some of that stuff in. Not that this really ties back into the previous movies that much anyway, but
no.
So this came out in 1988, so this is 5 years after the fourth movie.
Yep, 5 years after the fourth movie, and I believe we're at like 17 years since we started.
That sounds right, and Clint Eastwood at this point is now 58. He is 2 years away from being 60 at this point in the movie, which I note because I was curious. Patricia Clarkson's in this movie, and she's kind of a love interest. And I think of her as being old because she is like older compared to me. But I'm like, this is 1988. What age is she here? And I look her up. She's 29 when this movie came out.
Just shy of 30.
So she's just shy of. She's literally half his age. She's actually half his age, which, you know, is a Hollywood thing, but it's funny to me.
Yeah, I mean, not to spoil anything too much, but to the movie's credit, I don't think ever get really physical on screen.
On screen, no. It's implied that it happens off screen, but yeah, you don't ever really see too much on screen.
Something at least.
Yeah, it is funny though, because my perception of her is an older woman, because just of what she is relative to me. It didn't feel weird in the movie, but then when I thought about it, I went, wait, what age is she actually in this movie? So, she's not even 30 yet.
Oh, jeez. I mean, that's been a problem I've had with Clint Eastwood this entire franchise, is that in my mind, he's still like $1 million baby age.
Oh, sure.
Like the whole way through.
He's an old man.
Yep. He
kind of is an old man in this one a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
He's at that point now where he's sort of switching into old man territory. But, so... We have this movie. The first thing that I actually want to say about it, bizarrely, and you know, I don't know how you feel about me talking about aspect ratios, but this is the only movie in the franchise that is a different aspect ratio. All of them up until this point have been the wider, 2.40 to 1, the cinematic aspect ratio. This one is 1.85, which is close to 16:9, right? There's little tiny black bars technically on a widescreen TV, but sometimes they'll just overscan them and you won't see them. It doesn't really matter. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing per se. Like, you may have a personal preference. It stuck out to me though, because I was like, every single movie in this franchise has had this same wide cinematic look to it, and this one doesn't. And it's not necessarily that this is a worse ratio, it's purely down to taste. But it did kind of make me feel like there's a lack of care about making the consistency. So it feels like a downgrade in that sense, where we don't care about this feeling like it's the same quality of movie anymore. And that's not the only thing in the movie that feels that way, but it definitely,
for sure.
It was just the first little sign. I was like, oh, this feels like you don't care as much. Right?
I mean, to be fair, I've been switching between like 3 different screens watching this franchise as a whole. So I didn't notice that it was a different aspect ratio, to be honest. But yeah, if it is, as you're saying, not quite as cinematic, that is something that carries over to the entire rest of the film, just through other choices made.
Oh, the plot, the villain, all of it feels like, oh, this is a villain from an episode of a TV show as opposed to the villain in a major movie kind of thing. There's a lot of that feel to it.
I could fully see this being the backdoor pilot or like the TV movie that starts off Dirty Harry coming on after Columbo.
Which is a kind of a indictment of the movie a little bit. This feels like it could be a TV movie. It just happens to have Clint Eastwood in it, and if it wasn't for that, and there's some other names in it, but the names that are in it are all not big yet. They're not famous yet, right? So
no, but it's so weird to see them here.
I know it is. So you've got a young Jim Carrey who's credited as James Carrey, which I noticed.
That threw me off.
Much like Larry Fishburne in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, The Dream Warriors. You've got Patricia Clarkson, who's the love of it. I don't know if she was big yet. I really don't know what her career path was, but
I'm sure she had at least a few films under her belt.
Liam Neeson's in here, and this is before Darkman, which is kind of what I think of his first big movie as, which is obviously before Schindler's List, which obviously is big, acclaimed performance.
Right.
So this is early Liam Neeson, and it's early Jim Carrey, and then possibly early Patricia Clarkson. So you've got a lot of this has easily got the most recognizable faces in terms of a modern Hollywood context in it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was going into this movie and, opening credits come up. Honestly, we talked before about Jim Carrey being in it, so I was like, oh, I can't wait for him to show up. But I knew he was a smaller role, so I wasn't looking for him in the credits or anything. But then I saw Liam Neeson's name pop up. And I was like, we haven't talked about it. I didn't even realize he was in this. And I was waiting to see where he would be. And he ends up being a producer character. And it's interesting. I'm pretty sure he's Irish, correct?
Yeah, he's from Northern Ireland, I believe.
Right. I couldn't tell if that was his normal accent he was putting on the whole time or if he was going more British.
I think he was trying to do an English accent because when someone mimics his voice, they just do an English accent as well.
And I've remind me when we get to the mimic his voice part because I have problems with that. But it was strange just to see because like you said, Darkman, like that sort of grimy, gritty, like Liam Neeson almost action star is just the way I have him in my mind, and to see him here is just like playing second banana to a guy who's about to get his Social Security check. It's just like okay, that's different.
Well, the irony being that Liam Neeson is now an action star who's on a Social Security check.
Yeah, right.
He's kind of
the times are changing.
He's became the Clint Eastwood in a lot of ways of the modern movie world. I'm just curious what age he was at this time. So he's older than Clarkson. He was born in 52, so he's and he's like mid 30s. Yeah, he's about 36.
Roundabout. And so, I mean, that's what his character is too. It's not.
Yeah. He's not miscast in his role. He's a movie director who like makes horror movies. That's kind of his character. So we'll get into kind of how he fits into the. But he's a relatively prominent role. He recurs throughout the movie. As does Clarkson. It's just Jim Carrey's the only one who's kind of here for a couple of scenes and then he's gone. Type of character.
But dear Lord, does he steal those couple scenes?
That is true. He's also very like even though Jim Carrey as a persona doesn't exist yet. Like the way he moves his mouth and he does like a lip syncing scene. I'm like, okay, he's still Jim. I can see Jim Carrey here. Like not just because he's physically Jim Carrey, but the way he's like putting the faces on. I'm like, that's Jim Carrey. That's the guy who's about to be Ace Ventura in a couple of years. Yeah,
I mean, Jim Carrey had a lot of small roles before he really did hit it big. He didn't just get big all of a sudden. So he's been around up before this point. But as soon as that lip sync scene started and he's just like opening his mouth and it just keeps going, I was like, yep, there he is.
And he's doing these head movements, and I'm like, that's it's very like, okay, this is still, despite the fact that he's in a Dirty Harry movie, despite the fact that he's a minor role, he's still being Jim Carrey.
Yep.
And that's, it's notable. So, you got some recognizable faces. Harry gets a new partner. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the plot. We'll talk about all the things this movie has to offer. And we'll give you spoiler warning before we get to the spoilers. But
yes,
as always, we'll start with the simple question. David, did you enjoy Dirty Harry Part 5, The Deadpool?
Did I enjoy it? Well, based off of the wording of that question, yes, I did enjoy this movie. But it's not because of the reasons that I enjoyed like the first Dirty. This is so far removed from Dirty Harry. This is so far like there's all of like the theming we've talked about in previous installations of this of like, here's Harry dealing with the morality of X, Y, and Z. Out the window.
It's all
doesn't
gone.
matter.
Yeah, it's all the only like because we've complained in the sequels that it doesn't really say anything necessarily, but at least it's bringing in themes that it feels like Harry should be thrown up against.
Right.
This one doesn't even have that. The only thing you could maybe say is slightly there is the idea of like Harry dealing with like a relationship with the media and like his public persona.
Then, it's nothing about his ethics on it. It's literally about how the reporter's ethics are. But with all that said, this movie just goes to 11 on the corny campiness of it, like of how stupidly silly all of this is, and it circles back to just being a dumb, fun like action flick.
My thing is that I do think it feels lower stakes than the previous movies. I think the climax feels like, given how good the entrance was to the climax of the last movie, this one feels so TV like level.
Oh, absolutely.
It feels so low key. I would say this movie is by far the least interesting and kind of the most dull to a point.
Okay.
For a lot of it. I will say though that once you get just over an hour in, the best car chase in cinematic history happens, and it kind of won me over a little bit in the silly sort of stakes.
Yeah.
Which
I mean, if I went into this with the snobby like critic glasses and looking at it through those lens, I'd hate this movie. But at like probably about an hour in, I was just like, okay, you're not even trying to do that. So I'm just going to look at it through the lens of the same way you'd look at like any other 80s action film of like, is this just stupid fun?
Yeah, which I think is kind of weird though, because Dirty Harry wasn't that to start with, and that's kind of that's kind of a problem, and just in terms of like shifting your brain over to it, I think another franchise that we're definitely going to do at some point that did this was Rambo, right? So First Blood is this like serious movie about this guy who comes back from Vietnam and has psychological trauma and how people treat him and what he's working, and it's a like First Blood's a genuinely great little movie about this troubled character, and then someone said, but people like Sylvester Stallone in that outfit. Can we do just an action movie? And Jim Cameron comes along and says, "I'll write a sequel that's more of a and he didn't direct it. He went off to do Aliens instead. Which, by the way, the right choice. Like that was the right choice to pick.
I'm sure.
For directing. But you have like these silly sequels, and then Stallone himself tried to bring it back with Rambo 4, which was the 2008 one, and then I've not even seen the fifth one yet. It's meant to be bad. But that'll be something for us to discover when we get there, is what that fifth one's like. But I think that kind of went through that phase where it was like, it's turning from a real prestigious movie that actually has something to say and is like the serious work of art. And that sounds a bit pretentious, but it is. It's a serious work of art.
No,
I think the first Dirty Harry is an actual film. It's not just a movie, it's a film, to use the wording. And then the sequels are kind of trying to like cling to it a little bit, but they're also being sillier. This one, it's just like you get to some of the stuff later on in this movie, and it's like, no, you're not even even how Harry ultimately beats the bad guy. I laughed out loud when he walked into the shot holding what he was holding.
God, it was beautiful. I think that's just something that happens to a lot of those sort of movies. The one that jumps into my mind was Sam Mendes's Jarhead, where it was a movie that was basically just like a condemnation of this specific war. And it was just how the soldiers were just basically being tasked to fight a war that like none of them were actually doing anything in. They were just being trained to do this. And then all the sequels came out and they're like, soldiers fight, right? Everybody's going to fight now. It's just action. Whereas the first movie had something to say. The only thing that the producers of the sequels got was guns shoot things, so let's keep doing that.
I do not think I was aware that there was sequels to Jarhead.
There were like 4 sequels to Jarhead.
I'm assuming they're direct-to-video.
Yes.
Okay, right, because I do not have any recollection. I mean, I've never seen Jarhead anyway, but I definitely did not know there were sequels in but I'd seen the first movie be advertised. I saw the first movie getting some prestige, or there was noise around it. I did not know there were sequels.
But that's where I think the Dirty Harry franchise is actually a bit interesting, because it took like 4 films to get to the point where all these other ones are doing it in the second film. It managed to hold on to a little bit more of what it was, but in the end, by the time we hit this film, it does just go full like, nah, we're not saying anything. We're just here for the fun.
Yeah. And maybe there's a cultural thing there as well. The idea that this started in the early 70s when the counterculture was a big thing, but then when you get to the 80s, it kind of shifts a little bit. You know, the climate, particularly in the US with Reagan and stuff. And
I mean, if I really want to put on the over-analyzing glasses, this whole movie does revolve around how media tends to overdo the, death and destruction sort of angle. So the movie itself could just be a response to that, where it's like, nobody wants to sit here and hear the introspective thoughts of a cop who's too old for the system anymore. We just want to see the death and destruction. So
yeah, I suppose in that sense, it could have almost turned into under another draft of the script with someone who wanted to actually say something about that topic could take it and turn it into, oh, this is an analysis of how we view violence in cinema, and but it doesn't say anything.
No, it says nothing.
It says nothing. It says nothing of value. Director of this is Buddy Van Horn, who I've never heard of. So let's just see if he's made anything else of note. Oh, he did High Plains Drifter. Oh no, wait, no, he was a stuntman in that. Hold on. He did
stuntman being director is always a good sign.
He did stunts for In the Lane of Fire, which is another Eastwood movie as well, along with High Plains. He's looking at 3 directing credits. He did Any Which Way You Can. Is that also an Eastwood movie?
I believe it is.
Yeah,
I think he's just teaming up with Eastwood for his entire.
So he did the Deadpool, and then the year after Deadpool, he did Pink Cadillac. I'm just going to click on it. It's Eastwood.
Also Eastwood, yes.
So this guy has done stunts for Eastwood movies and then directed 3 lower stakes Eastwood movies.
Quick question: has anyone ever seen this guy and Eastwood in the same room?
That's a very good point. Oh, this dude only just died last year. He lived to 92 years old.
Good on him.
Yeah, he had a good run. But Eastwood outlasted him. Like, he actually is older. I think Eastwood's like 90. No, he's 92 this year. So
he's 92 as well.
So as long as he makes it to 93, he'll actually have done another year on this guy, which is kind of funny.
Here's hoping.
So you've got this plot where there's a murderer killing people who all happen to be on this list, this Deadpool list, that the director, producer, and like another couple of people in this film project have all just taken an innocent little pool, whereas, this guess who's going to die next. I do think this game's a bit silly, because I'm like, unless someone does start murdering them, like, you may be waiting for a long time for these results to come in.
Well, no, they did specifically say the rules to it was that you make a list of names that you think will be dead by a certain date, and then whoever has the most correct names wins.
Because some of them, like, I get why, because Jim Carrey's actor character, he's like a heroin addict, so I get why you think he might go quick, but like the film critic character who gets murdered at one point, like there was nothing about her that felt like she was in danger.
Yeah, that part of it, like, there's a couple people in there, and it's all people who kind of relate to Liam Neeson's character. I believe it was Peter North was
Swan. Peter Swan. Peter North, I'm pretty sure, is a porn star.
Fair enough.
So I don't know where you pulled that from, David. But,
I don't know where I did either. It's somewhere on my notes here. Oh yes, Return to Blockbuster. There it is. But no, the Peter Swan's character. I do feel like you say it's an innocent enough little game, but I also feel like he definitely picked names of people that he
doesn't like. Yeah,
just doesn't like, which does make it a little bit. It's the same sort of thing of like, writing a little fan fiction where like your bully in school is horribly maimed or something like that. It's like technically harmless, but at the same time very grim.
Yeah, and the movie starts with presumably it's Neeson's character Swan who's watching the news and hears that this guy's going to prison, and the news reporters keep saying Inspector Harley Callahan's the man behind this. He's the one who put him away, and he writes down him as the 8th name in the list because they're probably going to try and kill him now. Which honestly, as far as your logic goes for why someone might die soon, yeah, fair enough, right? And let's be fair, the last movie we saw Harry, there was like 5 assassination attempts over the course of one movie from at least 3 different parties, which Fair enough. The first time we see Harry in this movie, what's the very first thing that happens to him? There's an assassination attempt, just randomly.
It's the guys that he literally thought he was going to be killed by, so fair enough. But at the same point, yeah, no, it's the entire movie. It gets to the point where about halfway through, Harry has to literally put in a plan to stop being assassinated.
Yes.
Like, it's just constantly happening.
So that's how the movie kicks off.
I do want to point out that in that opening scene, they specifically show the ponytail that Liam Neeson's character has.
Mm-hmm.
And they use that as a misdirect throughout the entire film.
There's a few points, not even just the red herrings for who the killer is. There's actually at one point when we get to the random action scene at one point, there's a blonde guy with a really, really sad looking rat's tail behind. He's got like a shaved head except the rat's tail, and it just, well, I say, well, not shaved, but like a buzz cut kind of, like, you know, he's got a bit of hair, but it's all short hair, but then he's got this really thin rat's tail at the back, and I'm like, damn, 1988 was a rough year for haircuts. So if this movie's ending to go by, the opening big thing. What struck me out about it is, and this goes to what you were saying about how they've given up pretending that this is anything other than just dumb fun. Is so we're still spoiler free. I don't think it's too spoiler to just talk about this opening scene. So Harry's just driving. It's night. It's San Francisco, and this car pulls up behind him. And I think the first line Harry has in the movie is like, stare at my ass, because this car is driving up behind him, and the car pulls up in front of him. The three guys get out, they pull out machine guns and just start firing, and we get, Harry's car, like, flips and lands on its side. And what got me about this, and the first moment I sort of laughed, was Harry like pops out, so the car's on its side, so the side window sort of facing up the way. He pops out of that with his magnum and just shoots two of the guys instantly. But when he does it, the music that plays was notably very different from the previous movies. Yeah. It was very, like, heroic, and it was like, hey, our hero's here and he's killing the bad guys, everyone cheer. Like, that's what it felt like. And to the franchise's credit, up until now, it's not done that. The music's always been more, like, thriller, badass, kind of somber, whatever,
I mean, I've occasionally chimed in with my issues of musical choice, but this movie, I mean, the opening sequence has always been at least a little bit jazzy. Yeah. But this one was just full on, like, nope, we're in the 80s now, Miami Vice, just play that, who cares? And I think it continues on with those interesting yet pretty predictable choices the whole way through.
So you've got this heroic music playing, because this is Harry, he's our hero, and he's just shot two bad guys. The third guy's gun jams, so he actually puts his gun down and runs away. And can I just, like, under no circumstance is there anything heroic about Harry shooting a man in the back who's running away scared, right? Like,
he's a bad guy, Pete. All bad guys deserve to be shot. Did you not watch the rest of Dirty Harry? Clearly, that's the message we were getting at the whole time. I'm just, like, he shoots someone in the back who's running away from him. And I get that he was shooting at him a minute ago, but clearly now there's no threat of being fired upon. So this is the most unjustworthy cause of a police shooting I've seen in these movies. And this movie's had a few dodgy ones. Oh, yeah, for sure.
But this guy's trying, and all I could think was, if they actually do the forensics, like, they can tell which direction the bullet came from. They're going to know he was running away.
Well, Harry, the prints for this guy are on that gun. He is 50 feet away, and he was shot twice in the back. You want to try to explain that one?
Yeah, I couldn't help but laugh. This set me off in the mood for this movie. Was this opening scene, and immediately there's actually a lot of little things here that it feels like it repeats stuff from the previous movies, because like almost the very next scene is the captain or whoever grilling him out because it's going to cost $13,000 to replace this car, and I'm like, wasn't this an exact line of dialogue in the previous movie?
Yeah, it's a little cheaper actually.
Yeah. Well, I think the last time it was the car plus all the store windows and shit. This time it was just the car.
Just the car. Who cares?
So the car's more expensive now on its own, perhaps, than the last movie. But it just, it sets up similar ideas, similar things. I think he even repeats a line from the first movie. Opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one. I'm sure he said that in the first one.
Yeah, it triggered something for me, but I couldn't remember if it was this franchise or if it was somewhere else. But he definitely, I vaguely remember him saying that.
Yeah,
This movie does have several points in it where it does feel like it knows it's the last one, and it's just like doing things of callbacks and things like that where it's like, hey, remember this? And I don't think that it's ever played too strongly where you're like, yeah, we get it,
No.
you're wrapping it, you're saying goodbye, you're giving your curtain call. It never really does that, but it is still noticeable at times.
It's kind of weird though, because I feel like if you notice the last one, like you'd want to do a story that feels like the final Dirty Harry story. You know, give him his Dark Knight Returns, give him his whatever it may be. And instead, it just kind of feels like we said earlier, like a made-for-TV kind of plot where it's just doing a really generic killer. You know, every time it cuts to like the killer at his desk, like writing his notes or like watching his TV, and it's that thing where it's hiding his face and it's doing all this sort of the typical serial killer thriller plot tropes.
Which it is worth noting, this is the only film in the whole franchise that specifically doesn't show us the killer. Every other one, it has revealed the killer.
It's not a
pretty early
surprise.
on.
Yeah, it's not like whereas here they're kind of going for like a not quite a whodunit, but they're trying to really like make it a big red herring apparent for a while.
I mean, the second film didn't show specifically which killer, but we did know that they were police.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one it hides it the whole way through and tries to play it up as a like, oh, bet you didn't see this coming, which in fairness I didn't, but that's just because they withheld information until like literally the moment they revealed it. So
yeah, and it's never really anyone like you're like, oh, I recognize them.
Yeah,
it's not like that.
It's not like, hey, if you rewind the film, you'll see them in all these early scenes. It's like, no, it's just the character that we're meeting for this first time right now.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think we'll give the spoiler warning so we can get into everything. The only other thing I'll say before is that the film wraps up just as quickly as the last one did, where as soon as the plot is done, like it's just the aerial shot of him walking away and the credits start rolling, and I kind of like, really, you don't want to do like a little bit of like an epilogue where Harry like has his goodbye, where he sort of feels like he's learned something, or he reflects upon his time as a cop or something. No, just roll credits. No one cares.
I do, much as we were saying before, that I like all those intro scenes of him getting into more and more crazy things. We wanted that to end with him like in space or something like that. I kind of wanted each of these movies to just end quicker and quicker, to the point where I wanted this last movie to like he shoots the guy, and then as soon as the bullet hits him, just boom, credits.
Freeze
like,
frame credits.
We're not even going. Yep.
Like actually freeze frame on the guy's reaction to being shot, just like bleh, and just and
then credits. That'd be perfect for me. Like, oh, okay, we're done now. Bye.
Yeah. So spoilers then from this point on for the Deadpool, should you be concerned. So yeah, believe it or not, there's another random Harry just happens to be there when something's going down. He's with his new partner. They're in like Chinatown or something, and they hear a gunshot, and there's like a restaurant being robbed or whatever, which it just so happens that one of the bystanders outside ends up in someone who was on the Deadpool list, which I thought was a really contrived connection. I'm like, why did you try and tie that into this? Like, just if it's going to be around that. Anyway, Harry sneaks in through the back. He sits down at one of the tables, so when the armed like bad guys are walking around, he's like, "You forgot your fortune cookie," and then he reads it and he just says, what did he say? Like, oh
god, what was it? It was like, you're shit out of luck.
Now, maybe he said that here as well, but that was definitely the end, is what.
Yeah, but I think that's his recurring line.
Yeah, which is a reference. To be fair, I think the whole idea at the end of the movie is that because the bad guy's the one with the gun, and he says you're out of shots, which means you're shit out of luck. I think that's meant to be like a flip, like callback to the original movie's line. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. It's those little mentions where I was like, I'm thinking I feel like that you're not doing this again.
Yeah. I feel like it would have been probably better if he'd been more like on the nose with it. I usually don't say that, but I feel like if he said you're out of shots, so I'm feeling pretty lucky, punk, or something, like something that'd be a bit more like direct to it. But whatever.
Yeah.
The only notable thing about this, really, because the actual action of the scene is not that interesting, is that his new partner,
yeah.
So Alquan, or Quan, I don't know how to pronounce it, but.
Yeah,
he's his new partner. What I appreciate about this is that Harry comes in at the start, and there's a lot of threats on his life, and that's the opening scene's literally him trying to be assassinated, and he comes in and his captain's like, hey, Detective or Inspector Kwan here, he's transferring over from this other division.
Well, you skipped a short little bit here where once again they threatened to take him off homicide because he's not playing the PR game apparently.
Oh, true. Yes, true. But then
and I was just like, yeah, sure, take him off. I'm sure he'll be back on in like 6 minutes, whatever. Who cares?
But then he threatens to quit, and that would be bad for PR. So they're like, okay, you can stay on homicide. So he just makes them fold immediately. But no, what I appreciate about this is that they say, hey, here's Inspector Alquan. He's moving over from whatever department to homicide.
He's in like gang investigations.
And I actually really liked that this was not some rookie. And Harry immediately goes, oh, that's great. You know, homicide could use a good cop like him. I was like, hey, like that's actually kind of a nice sentiment here, where usually he's like, oh, no, I don't want a partner. This guy sucks. And then he's like, well, he's going to be your partner now because you need like some backup. And I love that. It's almost meta where Harry just goes, I mean, most of my partners end up dead at the hospital. How does Al feel about this?
I mean, you say almost meta. That's just full meta. That's just the full of like, they do. You have a bad record here.
And I love that the expression on Kwan's face every time it cuts to him here, where he's like, "Hey, Kwan, you can handle this, right?" He's like, "Yeah, I think I can handle it." Like, there's a genuine fear of, oh shit, like I might be screwed. Harry's got a reputation. But anyway, I was bringing him up here because. Like, I thought they were going to do more with this, but when this thing happens at the restaurant, when Harry comes out and he's, like, taking out all of them, the last guy runs across the street into Kwan, who was, like, calling for backup. And Kwan, turns out, because he's Asian, knows martial arts, which, you know, okay, right, whatever, you can ignore that trope and just sort of appreciate that this is different to Harry, and Harry has to watch him, like, take him out, and he's kind of impressed. I thought it was interesting, though, that after he, does a couple of spin kicks, he knocks the guy down, he then handcuffs him, and I'm like, yeah, Harry, he took his guy in alive. You killed every other person that was involved with this. He actually arrested the guy. And while we're on the subject, Harry was once again opening fire in a busy restaurant full of innocent members of the public. The civilians were just all over the place, and Harry's just shooting first and not worrying about it.
I cannot express to you that these people, the people who wrote this and the people who produced this, they watched the first movie or read the first movie, and the thing that they took out of it was do whatever it takes to take in the guy.
Yes.
Which they then extrapolate to, you can fire in a restaurant full of people who are not your guy, and taking in your guy also means dead or alive. Yes. So that has been a thing since like the second movie. It is not ever going to. There's a difference between he's willing to cross the line and there's just this public reckless endangerment that he's just like, before even thinking about it, I started blasting. So anyway, I started blasting. I mean, yeah, there is, but I think that has been more of this series than not.
Oh
where
no,
he's just fully like, yeah, no, screw it, I'll just fire wherever.
I made this joke in the first movie because of the hot dog scene, and I stand by making it there, but it has definitely been much worse in the sequels. Yeah. So I just want to point it out.
Yeah.
At this point, it doesn't really matter anymore, but I'm just, it's consistent till this. But if anything, it's just gotten increasingly a little bit more silly every movie, and here we are. That said, though, this was nowhere near as funny as the random action scene from the last one, which was the guy at the diner and the coffee and the sugar stuff. Yeah. That had way more of a funny setup. This was just kind of, there's a gunshot in the distance. Let's go and deal with it. So
yeah, I mean, this one was actually somewhat plot relevant because it managed to get us the Deadpool list, which again, Harry's name was on because why not?
Yeah, but they already had it because the killer sent it in to the press.
I feel like this happened just before that, though. I feel like they got their hands on the list just before. Oh, no. You know what it was? It was that they were like, oh, hey, this person who was involved was also on the list. How weird that both of them ended up being shot. Crazy.
I can only assume. I actually laughed because they said, oh, who's this guy that's going out of the that's getting bagged up and taken to the morgue. It's like, just some innocent bystander. I went, was that Harry's bullet that killed him? That was my first thought.
Innocent bystander shot by a .44 Magnum, huh?
All I can assume is that the actual killer, because he was maybe following Harry because he's on the list, because the killer's going down this list, that he's specifically going after the people on the director's Deadpool list, right? He's going after them. I can only assume that he was following Harry. This broke out, and he used the opportunity or maybe he was following the other guy because this dead guy's on the list, which is the completely big coincidence of the whole thing. I can only assume that when this was all going on, he thought, I'll sneak in all the confusion and just quickly, take him down.
I mean, I honestly think that it literally was just happenstance. I can't imagine that the guy would have, because they spend so much time showing us from the perspective of the killer that he does just skulk around and get these people. The fact they didn't show that at all, even for a second, I think it was just like, no, he genuinely just died of nothing related to the plot.
It's too much of a coincidence. I can't accept this.
Oh, I'm sorry. This movie is...
It's too stupid. I can't accept.
The coincidence of them just happening to be right next to a robbery as it was breaking out. That's fine. That happens every Thursday for Harry. But...
Well, we talked about this last movie. He's got like an aura. He's got like a magnetism to crime and death.
I mean, yes. One thing that we kind of skipped over is that not the opening scene, but prior to the whole Deadpool being revealed, is Jim Carrey's scene.
Oh yeah, we've skipped over this. Yeah, we can go back and talk about this now. Yeah.
The first thing that happens is, all of Dirty Harry. He's trapped in the cars and whatever he's told.
Yeah, and then it's all the stuff where he gets his partner and they're talking to him at the station. It's after that it cuts to Jim Carrey.
It cuts like hard cut to Welcome to the Jungle, where Jim Carrey is dressed as a priest, but like with a punk aesthetic in this like neon lit hotel room, and there is a nun sitting in the bed, and he's like praying on the side of the bed and starts lip syncing to Welcome to the Jungle, and this goes on for a good like minute.
Well, they paid for the rights to a Guns N' Roses song. They're going to use as much of it as they possibly
can. They use it twice.
They use it again at the end, yeah.
But I got to tell you, that was the moment. As soon as that happened, first off, I was happy to see Jim Carrey. But as soon as that happened, I was like, okay, yeah, this isn't going to be anything but like just silly, is it? Like that was the moment. As soon as he's dancing around this, we find out it's a movie set, but as soon as he's dancing around this set, it was just balls out. Just like, yeah, no, this is just whatever. Have fun with it. It's not even trying to say a word. That's the moment that got me.
I don't think I get into the silliness of it until the car chase later, which we're definitely going to talk about because wild. Yeah. But yeah, that's Jim Carrey thing. He's doing a music video which is tying into the movie that he's making with Liam Neeson, who's the director. And all it really does is introduce that Liam Neeson's a bit of a prick to everyone he works with, and Jim Carrey's a heroin addict. And and then the very next scene, he goes back to his trailer, he shoots up, and that's when the killer comes and gets him. He pours something in his mouth. I don't think he really... I couldn't tell what it was, but...
They said that during the weightlifting scene, they said what it was. It was like some super drug of like cocaine and heroin.
Right, okay.
Something.
Which is actually something I want to point out, is that the killer does seem to have a different method for every victim, except after we get introduced to the toy car method. He then uses that again for Harry, which I thought was a bit... Like, yeah. I understand you want to set it up and then have the big payoff be the scene where Harry gets what it is, but it doesn't fit the MO where he's had a different method for every victim, so it's just a little bit...
Yeah, we find out that all the methods are him imitating methods that were used in Peter Swan's prior films.
Yeah.
And so I guess that maybe it was a toy car specifically, maybe it was just a general car explosion, I don't know, but that was something that... Yeah, they reused it specifically for the purpose of having that scene, because Harry would have no reason to recognize it beforehand.
Exactly, yeah.
Otherwise.
Yeah, you have to have a clue, otherwise you wouldn't get the best scene in the movie, which we'll talk about.
Absolutely. It is hands down the best scene in the movie.
So, yeah, Jim Carrey dies. The big thing that happens after this is that, the press want to talk to Harry because he's kind of semi-famous right now because he's involvement with this other big case, that with the guy going to prison.
Yep.
And Patricia Clarkson's trying to talk to him. She's a reporter. And she's running up to him, and because...
Her name is Sam Walker.
Yeah, Samantha, yeah. And because like the girlfriend of Jim Carrey shows up and starts crying, and the cameraman's trying to get a shot of her, basically, Harry's a bit of a sympathetic soul and says, no, leave her alone. And he grabs the camera off the cameraman and throws it to the ground. And it's like, so then the captain's like, you destroyed a TV camera. The press are going to sue the police unless you do what this woman wants. And Samantha comes in and is like, I want dinner, Harry. So we cut to them in like a bar restaurant. And
which, real quick, I have my notes here from the second movie, and I'm just going to put here of my one line where it's everyone wants Harry's dick. just
to be fair, I don't necessarily. I mean, maybe she is attracted to him, but I think here at this point, her motive's more to get a story out of him.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know,
right here, it's all just about furthering career, because the next scene does straight up say that. She's like, now Harry, I have something very serious I want to talk to you about. And she literally pulls out a scrapbook of pretty much the entire Dirty Harry franchise, and we see that she actually flips open to the Scorpio case as one of the things. And that's one of those another one of those things of like, hey, see, we're calling back. We're going to. This is it. We're playing our greatest hits. But then of course Harry just chews her out and says like, all you people want is blood and guts and action and violence and whatnot. You don't care about me as a cop. I'm out of here. Just leaves.
He just leaves. But then when he goes back to see her, because the press get this Deadpool list, he goes to see her after she's done a report, and it's a bit, cold between them. She gives him the list, and then he turns around and says, hey, I owe you one, for dinner. And it cuts to them, and she's dressed all fancy. He's just wearing what he always wears, because he's always in a tie and his jacket. And they go up this glass elevator, and they end up in this restaurant. We cut to the end of the dinner, and they are getting on well enough. He's still saying no to the story, but he's gotten to know her. She's talking about moving to San Francisco, blah 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 blah. And there's a nice little scene here where they're leaving, and these two guys sort of notice Harry, and they start coming up behind him. And Harry, thinking he's about to be attacked, pulls out his gun, shoves his magnum in these guys' faces, and they're like, "Hey, Harry, we just want an autograph." So he has to send an autograph, and Samantha's just kind of smirking after this because she's like, "It's your 15 minutes, Harry. They love you." But then, of course, 2 minutes later, actual assassins show up and try and shoot them when they're in the elevator. And
again, this shootout, it's just, this elevator is destroyed.
Oh yeah,
There's nothing there.
And then Harry just shoots them all afterwards. There's really not much to it. The only interesting thing that the movie might be trying to do here is that Sam's kind of shaken, and there's a moment and aftermath when the ambulance is there and there's police. Is that there's some press trying to get in, but obviously she's not a part of that right now. She's sitting there and she's not traumatized.
She's the story.
Yeah, but she's a little shaken up, and she's like, "Hey, it's my colleagues. I don't want to be the news." And it's almost like, you're almost hitting the something here. The reporter who's usually chasing the story now all of a sudden doesn't want to be that herself. It's sort of maybe acknowledging a slight double standard to it, or hypocrisy.
And I think that there is something strong enough there, because by the time we'll get to it, of the gasoline scene, they do fully just state the theme and pretty much come full circle on the arc. But the biggest issue is that's the end of Act 2, and they come full circle on the arc. And
it's also what you said earlier, it's not Harry's arc, it's her arc.
Exactly. She wraps up her character arc, and then we have to continue on for another 30 minutes. And it's like, okay, but this isn't what Harry's arc is. This is just you guys saying, oh, here's a bit of a morality thing, and we'll move on from it. But Harry doesn't have to learn anything from that. He's already on the right side of it. He doesn't have to come to grips with, maybe I should play nice with the media. It's like, no, he literally ends this the same way he starts, where he just blows off the media and walks away. Yeah,
she just learns that Harry's right. So Harry doesn't really have much of an arc in this movie.
Not at all.
Which also, actually, just since we're on his love interest here, because they obviously from this scene it seems like they're starting to have a bit of a spark. I guess he just never stayed in touch with the lady from the last movie.
I mean, when your entire relationship is built on being rival vigilantes, you're destined to burn out, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose. It's not much of a talking point. I just, I want you to acknowledge that it's just, a lot of franchises do this where they just forget the love interest between movies. It's not a big deal.
You say that, but this was this is again just continuing on the thing of anything that was established by the end of the last Dirty Harry film, you just forget going into the next
True.
Dirty Harry film.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, pretty much at this point, there's another, it's the critic gets killed. As this is happening, it's like, it kind of seems like this is all Peter Swan's enemies that are getting killed here. But Harry immediately is like, nah, this doesn't feel right. Something's off about this. And they kind of, I'm just trying.
They've been talking to Quan this whole time, like visiting him constantly. And he's like, oh, this is harassment. Stay off my set. I'm going to finish my movie. And at one point when they're going to visit him, just coming up later, they specifically show a scene with a harpoon gun.
With so I don't know if it's actually Guns N' Roses, but there's someone who's meant to at least look like Slash.
Thank you. I was waiting for them to like hold on the guy just long enough to see if it's Slash, but they never did. And I was like, was it? Is it him?
I mean, they paid for the song, so it's not outrageous that they might be in here.
I mean, it's entirely possible, but I looked through the cast afterwards and I didn't see him, so I don't know. But anyway, they finally go back and talk to him again as he's at like a funeral or whatever, and basically
it's Jim Carrey's funeral.
Yeah. They have him at Jim Carrey's funeral. Basically tell him like, look, we know it's not you. We've checked in with everybody. Like we think that someone's trying to frame you. Do you have any idea who it could be? And basically he comes down to like, well, I'm a genius, so everyone hates my
Everyone's
genius.
jealous, yes. And that's a different scene from the scene where we actually finally get to the suspect, where he's like, oh yeah, there was this guy who was obsessed with my films and wanted me to direct a script he'd written, and I had to get a restraining order. And there's like no swerve here at all. It is just this guy is the killer.
Yeah. It comes, I think that there was the swerve they were trying to go for was that throughout the entire movie, Swan keeps on yelling at like his technical assistant because he keeps on messing stuff up. But they make it very clear that the killer, whoever it is, has Swan's ponytail. And then this guy doesn't. And it's entirely possible he could just like put on a ponytail or something like that. But there's also a scene later on where they specifically show the killer like from the nose down. And Swan is clean shaven, and the technical assistant has a goatee. So it's also not him. So I don't know where they were trying to go with the swerve. I don't even know if there was a swerve, but it felt like they were trying to set something up at some point of like, is it Swan? Is it this technical assistant? And then only at the end of the second act, they say, no, it's this guy you never met before. And I'm like, oh.
I feel like all the stuff we still have to talk about are all just kind of individual things. So we have another killing, which is the killer has a bomb on a toy car that he drives. He drives underneath a parked car with the victim in it and just sets off the bomb. And
the victim was like a moral guardian who was like, oh, Peter Swan's films are too violent and shouldn't be watched and whatever.
So we get a couple of scenes at the crime scene afterwards where he's talking to the bomb expert guy and they're talking about how this happened, and he finds a little wheel and he's like, oh, it's like a wheel off of a toy car or something. He's just kind of confused, like, why is this here? And it's like, okay, so that sets up the scene. So it's actually Harry ends up spending the night with Patricia Clarkson's character.
Yes.
And his partner comes and picks him up the next day and cracks a couple of jokes. Because actually, the day before, he even says to Harry, look, things are quite dangerous for you right now. Why don't you come and stay at my place so you don't have to stay at yours? Because that's probably too dangerous. And then Patricia Clarkson pulls up and he's like, I've got a better option. So he goes with her. Right. So, okay, fine, whatever. So he picks him up the next day and they're driving. And the villain is like parked across the road. And it just so happens that while he's got his toy car out with the bomb on it, which you don't see the bomb, you just assume the bomb's like inside the car, right? There happens to be some kids on the street with their own toy car, and the frequencies get crossed, and he can't quite control it properly. So he can't do it while they're still parked. Harry and Quan take off in the car. And so he has to drive whilst using one hand to control the remote control car. Now, most remote control cars, and you see this is the case in this movie for this one, it's, there's two joysticks, one controls, forward and back, the other one controls left and right. You can control that with one hand, right?
Okay. This is the most, unbelievable scene out of this entire franchise.
I'm only just getting started. But
it's not even because of that. Yes, okay, he's driving it, cool, whatever, but, from the moment that it starts, it's like, oh, he's driving this toy car up, and then the frequencies get jammed or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay, of course they do, sure. It's just giving a little bit of time ahead. But then you start getting into the actual chase, and every single time they like cut to a different angle, it's doing something even more extremely like, are you kidding me right now?
Well, no, even before you get to the extreme things it does, though, even just the idea that once, because Eastwood like and co, they pull up at a light and the toy car drives underneath them and appears in front of them, and Eastwood sort of clocks, wait a minute, that car's got a bomb on it. That's how they killed the other guy. So Eastwood backs up, and it becomes this chase where you've got Eastwood or Dirty Harry in the car with his partner driving in front. You've got the toy car behind that car chasing after them, and then you've got the killer in a car controlling the toy car chasing after behind that. The idea that this toy car can even approach the speed of an actual vehicle that's driving away from it, if it's one thing if it's driving peacefully down the street, but he is actually racing away from the toy car at a considerable speed. There is no way, shape and form this toy car can go 60 miles an hour and keep up with Eastwood.
I mean,
that's number one.
Toys were made differently back in the 70s. It may have had a diesel engine. I don't know.
No. Point number one, there is no way this car could keep speed with an actual vehicle. That's point one.
Accepted. Sure.
Point two is that for some reason when the toy car swerves onto the pavement or the sidewalk, and people, there's like a POV shot of the toy car at one point, and the people on the sidewalk are like diving out the way of the toy car. I'm like, why? It would just hit your leg and you wouldn't feel it. It would be nothing.
No, that's the sort of thing, like, I saw that scene and I'm like, look, you are in San Francisco in the late 80s. I guarantee you're going to see, like, a bunch of people jumping out of the way. And then you're going to get to that one, like, 12-year-old who's just going to, like, see the car coming and actively kick it. Like, there's no way that every single person here is going to move. What would actually happen is Harry would be heading down the street, and then all of a sudden in his rear view on the sidewalk, there'd just be a massive explosion.
And not even just that, like, they're not even just moving out the way. Like, you see a couple people actually dive, as if they're diving out the way of a real car, as if they're worried about getting hit. And I'm like, this thing is not going to hurt you. You'll feel a tap on your foot. That is all you're going to feel.
Yep.
Right? And then you get back into the chase, and you've got that classic San Francisco thing where they're driving really fast down the hill. So every time they go over a steep part of the hill, the car jumps in the air, and then the toy car does the same thing.
No. See, the best part of that was that they did it. It took, like, Harry takes the jump, the car takes the jump, the killer takes the jump, and then they're like, that was pretty cool. Let's do it again. And then they did the exact same shot. Like, jumping over the second hill, and they focused on the exact same order of things. And it's like, wow, thanks guys, I missed it the first time.
And the whole thing ends with a game of chicken.
Hold on. You missed the one that got me the most.
Oh, go on then.
Which was, at one point, there's an open manhole cover. Two guys are working down in, like, the sewers. There's an open manhole cover. Harry's car, like, I think swerves out of the way around them. But then the toy car, they make sure to specifically show that this toy car drives directly over this manhole cover. Like, open hole, and somehow makes it off to the other side. At no point did they put back on the lid. Did they show how it managed to jump this 2-foot gap where it should just went right into the hole? Nothing. But they specifically show you that the only car that couldn't cover it did.
I just remember the other thing before the end that really made me laugh is the killer at one point just decides to pop a wheelie in the toy car, so the toy car goes out its back wheels and sort of goes down like that with its front wheels up in the air. And I'm like, why can this do this? And why is the toy car like skidding around corners? It can't go that fast. The whole thing was silly.
I have to assume that whoever was in charge of, like, the toy car or something like that, like, he was told he was going to have this, like, thing. It's like, oh, we just need you to drive it under this guy's car for this one scene. And he's like, yeah, sure, okay. But then he, like, spent the next 6 weeks getting real good at it. And so as soon as it came to the actual day shooting, he's like, guys, hear me out. I could go under the car, or I can pop a wheelie.
So you've got all this going on, and then it finally ends with perhaps the most ridiculous part Eastwood and Co. end down an alleyway, so they turn around, and then the toy car is out on the other end of the alleyway, and we get a game of chicken where they're sitting there having a face-off with this toy car. And then the toy car drives under their car, and Eastwood just tries to time pulling away. Like, he just tries to drive at the last second, hoping he'll get away. And what's weird is that he really doesn't. The toy car explodes under the front of the car. It just so happens to not completely explode it. Like the first car that the killer killed this way, the entire car went up. It was like a complete massacre. This time, it's just the engine's a bit on fire, and then like, the two guys are like, they're a bit, there's a bit of bruising or whatever. Quan ends up in the hospital.
Quan's end up in the hospital. Bravo, Harry. Yes. 5 for 5. You did it.
But he's alive.
Yeah. But the first one in the first movie was too, so it's all about whether they're dead or hospitalized.
To be fair, they actually have a friendship. They go jogging together. They're at the gym at one point. Harry almost gets him killed in the gym because he stops spotting them because he gets distracted by a pretty lady.
Yeah.
But, which felt a little like a character to me. I don't feel like Harry's ever gotten distracted like that before by a woman.
I mean, if you technically want to say in the first movie with the peeping scene when he was on the binoculars, but yeah, other than that, honestly, that's what this really came off the most to me, was that every time they made a callback in this movie, it was to the first movie. Like, they kept on, it was just like, hey guys, but like, remember all the things we did in the first movie, while actively ignoring all the things that made the first movie great.
Yeah. It felt a bit out of character because he's not, like, yeah, maybe he got distracted by that but he was still just staking out. He wasn't missing something important because he was looking at that. Whereas here, like, Quan's like, Harry, lift up the weights, Harry. But, I appreciate they had a bit of a friendship and they had a bit of camaraderie. That was kind of nice. It was a little bit different from the previous partners. I'll give it that.
Yeah, I mean, this one, I feel like this is probably the most I've felt him really be with his partner since the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they took the time to say, like, oh yeah, here's like this guy, he has like a grandfather who believes in like ancient charms and stuff like that and good luck symbols and whatever. So they took the time to explain, like, hey, here's who he is, here's what he does. Unlike, say, I don't know, Meathead, which had nothing going for it. So
and it felt like when he was at crime scenes, his partner was off getting other information. I always felt like he was doing something that just
it just felt weird to me. It almost felt like it was like trying to tap into like lightly racist the whole time, but like at the same time it was just playing it of just like, no, that's just who he is. I don't know, it was weird. Well,
it was funny actually because the scene where they introduced Quan and they say he's your partner now, the PR guy who's saying, Harry, you need to like talk to the press more. Sorry, he says at the end, it's kind of good that you're partners with Harry, because Harry being partnered with a Chinese American is probably good for the press. And like it cuts to the lieutenant or the captain just face palming because it was just such a stupid, like, insensitive thing to say.
At the same point, the writers of this movie have the only Asian guy in this whole franchise know kung fu and have like Chinese symbols painted onto his body.
Oh yeah,
like it feels very tone deaf. For literally, they showed how it was insensitive in its own movie. It just felt tone deaf the whole way through.
Yeah, part of that feels like, I mean, the point is completely valid. Part of me just feels like that's just the 80s. Like, I feel like the way they treat this character feels like how most movies in the 80s would treat this character, which is not a good thing. I'm just saying that's just how it is.
Like, if it did this in any of the first two movies, I'd just be like, yep, that tracks. That just seems like exactly what it would be. But it was weird because they specifically, like you said, had that part where the captain or whoever said, like, oh, it's good for PR that you're a Chinaman. It's like, that's not okay to say. They literally call that out, but then they keep doing it anyway. I don't know. It just seemed weird to me that it was a double standard.
It's very odd. So I brought up the jogging scene, which reminds me we have to talk about Harry's like prevention of getting more assassinated.
Yes.
So there's a couple of assassination attempts. The first one obviously being the most notable at the start of the movie, but this killer who's went to prison wants Harry dead.
Lou Gennaro.
Gennaro, there you go. Holly Gennaro. Is he related to John McClane's wife? I don't know.
Probably not, but that would be a great cinematic universe.
So Harry's plan halfway through the movie is he goes to the prison and he finds a big beefy looking prisoner. He's like, hey you, I need your help to just go stand somewhere, right? And it takes him down to go and talk to this Gennaro guy, and he goes up, and he just leaves the big muscly guy, the big meathead dude, no reference to the dog. He leaves him back at the sort of the entrance of the hallway, and he goes up to Gennaro and just sort of like says, "Oh, you want me dead?" There's some back and forth. You're a punk, blah 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 blah, and then says, "Hey, see that guy over there? Like he gets a letter from me every week, and you're the mailman." And what that means is if he doesn't get the letter from me, because I'm helping him get better, privileges in prison. I'm looking out for his sick mother. If he doesn't hear from me,
just straight up lying, by the way. None of this is true.
I think my favorite part of this is he doesn't tell the big guy what his plan is. He just says, just stand there, and look intimidating, and that's all you need to do. He goes and talks to him. He scares the shit out of the guy. If anything happens to me, this guy's coming for you. And then on the way out, he sort of says something to the guy to make him look angry. And then
he's like, because the whole thing was he was trading for a pack of cigarettes.
That's right.
Like,
yeah.
That Gennaro guy says that if you're smoking, you must be stupid.
He's like, which leads to the end of the jogging scene where these two guys are following Harry. You think it's another assassination attempt, because why wouldn't we? It happens so often at this point. But Harry outsmarts them, starts punching the shit out of them. Luckily for them, he didn't just open fire because he didn't have his gun on him, because he was in
very out of character for Harry, honestly.
Yeah, well, he was jogging, so he just had a t-shirt and he had his joggers on, and the guy's like, "Hey, it's not an assassination attempt. We're not a hit. We are hired by Gennaro because he's hired us to protect you. He's making sure nothing bad happens to you so that he's safe in prison." And I thought it's too. This is the thing. Much like the toy car scene, right? That toy car race is fantastic. I don't necessarily think it's good to be in a Dirty Harry movie. I think in a different movie, I think it would be an amazing addition for a more light-hearted film. Equally, this, I think this is funny. This is a funny punchline that I don't necessarily want a Dirty Harry movie, but it did make me laugh that this guy is protecting Harry because it's worked so well.
Yeah. And honestly, I was thinking that those guys were going to come back later. Like, they were going to be something that comes up at the end. But it was, looking back on it now, it was literally just the punchline to the entire Gennaro plot. Where it's just like, ha ha ha, these guys who were hired to protect Harry literally
I think
are weaker than him.
I think that is a valid point you just made. I think it is a poor script that these guys didn't show up to help him in the finale or something. When shit's going down, they should have been like, "Oh, this is how he ends up winning at the end, is that he's got these two bodyguards or something that are looking out for him."
It doesn't even need to be that he wins in the end. It just needs to be that it helps him to some extent.
Yeah. So that would just be good setup and payoff. Like this could be like, oh, this entire subplot actually had a payoff in the main plot by the end. That would actually be not amazing, right? I'm not saying it would completely make it look like a genius script, but it would be a functional reason to have it there, and it would work better. So I'm kind of annoyed at them now for not using that in some way by the end. Because honestly, the entire ending of the movie, which is just our one female character becomes a damsel because she gets kidnapped by the killer, and Harry has to go and save her. That's all that is.
Yeah, the killer's name is Harlan Rook, and as you said before, he was just like a super fan that Peter said, "Hey, I need a restraining order on this guy." So somehow he managed to get a job on security for the film
with a fake name.
With a fake name, and that allowed him to know about the Deadpool list, and therefore, because he's such a super fan, he's trying to help Peter win the whole thing. So
the only scene before the ending I guess we need to talk about is the guy who wants to set himself on fire.
Yeah, so that was pretty much right after the critic died. They get a call that there's a guy claiming to be the killer from the Deadpool list, and he specifically doesn't want any, like he's standing in the middle of town, he's doused himself in gasoline, he has a road flare next to him, he's threatening to set himself up, but then he says no cops, no firefighters, nothing like that. He only wants to talk to somebody that he recognizes from the media. So
well, yeah, I like that detail because he says at first they say he wants to talk to a reporter with a cameraman. And Harry says, "Oh, that's easy. Me and Quan will just, impersonate." And we've seen him. To be fair, we've seen him do that. He was the pilot in the second movie. We've seen him do this before. And he's like, "No, it has to be someone he recognizes." And then he looks over and sees Patricia Clarkson and goes, "Aha, I've got an idea." So
and he dresses up as the camera.
Yeah. So they go in, and I guess the end of her arc here is that instead of just going for the story, she actually tries to de-escalate the situation and talk him out of doing this.
Well, his whole reason for doing it is quite literally the extreme of her arc, of it being that he feels that no one ever paid attention to him, and in order to get the attention that he feels he deserves, he's going to do the death and gore and whatnot that he feels everyone pays attention to nowadays because of the news. And he thinks that the news is not going to pass up an opportunity to have this live on their station, so he will definitely be on TV. But then she's like, no, we're not going to do that. No one will know that you died.
Yeah, and unfortunately, though, he does still set himself on fire, and
accidentally, he's about to talk himself down, but the flare that he drops, of course, falls into the gasoline.
Yeah, so I guess you could say this is kind of them doing, because there's a scene in the first movie where Harry goes up in the cherry picker to talk to the jumper, and he actually stops him in that case. But here, like you said, he was going to back down, but stupidity and clumsiness got the better of him. But
even then, he lives. Like Harry jumps in, pats him down, and he gets out with a few burns. So
yeah, so it's kind of it's funny because like in some ways this is the scene that's trying to say the most probably in the whole movie, but it feels
absolutely,
it feels kind of out of place though because of it. It feels like it doesn't fit the rest of the film.
It feels like it's more of a moment that Harry can gain some adoration to the reporter character, more so than we're directly speaking to the theme here. It felt like more of a relationship development scene than a plot development scene.
Yeah. Which, and it's kind of weird because they're building up this adoration, like you say, but I don't necessarily feel like it goes out of its way to show that there's a deep personal feeling, like, blossoming.
I mean, if anything, they avoid that entirely by skipping over that scene of them spending the night together. We're just implied that deep feeling somehow developed, and we're just meant to infer it's there.
But the problem is, though, is that when Harry finds out she's been kidnapped, he barely reacts. He just kind of looks the way he always does. He's like, oh, we have to get to her.
You're just talking about Eastwood's acting ability. That's completely separate to the writing.
But I think it's written that way. I think what you would want to do, especially since it's the last movie, is maybe show that he finally has someone that he does really care about, and he really does want to go and save her, and it is like a personal thing beyond just being a cop and stopping the bad guy now. But I don't think it ever actually gives me that. He still feels like he's just acting like he did at the end of the last movie, or the end of the third movie, or the end of the second movie. Like he just feels like he's acting like Harry.
Yeah, I mean that is the thing of, I don't think that after the first movie any writer really felt that they could change Harry. He always had to be the same guy coming in as is when he left. They couldn't question anything about him.
Just in case they make a sixth movie.
Yeah, just in case that happens way down the road. Yeah,
so what I thought was weird actually, so he kidnaps her, but he phones her and claims he does his impression of Peter Swan.
And okay, yeah. So here's the thing. Liam Neeson, I don't think they knew this at the time, but Liam Neeson has a very specific voice.
Yes.
That is very iconic to him. So when they have this entire scene, and it happens a couple times through, the first one is during the critics' murder, they specifically have him putting on this like fake voice that is supposed to make you think, hey, this is Peter Swan. But because Liam Neeson's voice is so recognizable, it is immediately apparent to anybody who knows it, like, that's not him. That's not even close to him.
I suppose the solution to this might have been actually have Liam Neeson dub the scene.
Yeah, and I think that would have been the better option there if you actually meant it to be the swerve. But because of, honestly, I think that if Liam Neeson didn't really do anything more with the career, they might have been able to get away with it. In that, nobody would have known his voice.
But we all know Liam Neeson's voice so well because we've seen him in numerous movies over the last 3 decades.
Exactly. It's no fault of its own. There's no way it could have known how Liam Neeson's career trajectory would have gone, but because of the way it happens, it actually works as like an anti-swerve. Where I'm sure in the theaters they're sitting there thinking like, oh, that must be him because he looks the part and he sounds the part. But then to us afterwards, we're like, that's not Liam Neeson.
And not even just his voice. Like at one point, it's when he's killing the critic in her house that you see a lot of him like in side view silhouette, right? So they're hiding his face, but Liam Neeson's jawline again. Like I just like that. It's not him.
Yeah.
I know it's not him.
But again,
I can see
we
it's not him.
only know that because we have become familiar with Liam Neeson.
Yeah. He's got a very distinct face. It's just, you know. So, so what I thought was weird here is he phones Patricia Clarkson and says, I'm Peter Swan, I want an interview to get my side of the story out. And when Harry tries to contact her, when he realizes that her name's been added to the list, because they've found the killer's like apartment by this point, is they phone the news station and like whoever's there tells them, oh, she's went to this like area at the docks or whatever, the warehouse district, to talk to Peter Swan and get an interview. But Peter Swan, we've contacted him as well, and he knows nothing about it. So they're like, okay, she's in trouble. What I didn't get though is that it turns out that this location that he gave them, or that she was told for the interview, is accurate, because Harry just goes there and finds them. The reason why I think that's stupid is because he actually kidnaps her in the car park at the news station. So why did he give her the real location that he was going to take her to?
Maybe in case he couldn't get her at the car park. I don't know. Honestly, I think it's a writing flub in general.
Yeah. It struck me as weird because he kidnaps her in the car park. You know, he kills the camera guy that's going with her and kidnaps her there. He takes her to this place in the warehouse district. And then Harry just goes there without even struggling. He knew where to go because where they were told she was going was accurate, which feels as a criminal who's about to commit a crime, giving them that breadcrumb to find you that easily. It seems like a bit of a poor choice.
I mean, yeah. No, the only thing I could think is that he didn't think that she would tell anybody where she was going, and therefore it would have just been like okay, but like, nobody knows sort of thing. But yeah, there's no because the writers knew how things were going to go out, they could have easily changed it, and it is just a writing flub of like, well, we need the honestly, it might be a thing of when they initially wrote it, they thought like, okay, and so she'll go there and she'll be caught up by him, but then they realized she would probably bring a cameraman, wouldn't she? And so they had to explain away why the cameraman wasn't
either that
there.
or they just had to have like a reason for Harry to find them quickly because they didn't want to do a whole subplot of Harry discovering.
I mean, that's fair.
You know?
Yeah. Because they didn't really set up anything beforehand of how to possibly track her. So.
No. So ultimately, she's tied up. He's acting crazy and talking about as if he's Peter Swan, and then Harry shows up. It's nowhere near as an epic an entrance as the last movie. There's a bit of like a. No. Like fog or smoke machine coming up to like make him look a bit spookier, but
that's for the entire final scene.
That's about it. Ultimately though, like he makes Harry throw down his gun, and then Harry just grabs her, and they basically run away for a bit in the darkness, away from the killer, and eventually Harry splits from her. He gets down to the pier, and Harry walks out of the fog.
Well, this entire time, Rook has been firing off shots.
Yeah, he's got Harry's gun. Yeah, he's got
Yeah.
Harry's gun, and he fires a shot occasionally. And then it gets to the point where he's on the docks. He thinks he's got Harry cornered at this little building at the end of the pier. And Harry says something, and he's almost like a ghost because it's like from another direction. And he comes walking through the fog.
He just says, "You're out of bullets."
He walks through the fog, and the camera pulls back or pulls down, and we see him holding this ridiculously big harpoon gun. And he looks stupid holding this thing. It looks so silly. But he fires the harpoon gun, and the guy lands at the door. But yeah, he has the line where he's like, "You're out of shots," which makes your lunch run out, punk. And it's a callback to the "Do you feel lucky, punk?" 5 shots are only 6. Of course, Harry was counting because Harry does keep track.
I mean, to be fair, as soon as I knew that he was picking up the gun that was Harry's gun, I was like, I know how many bullets are in that. And therefore, I'm going to keep count. And it was actually 6.
They actually made sure it was the right amount. That's cool. Yeah, honestly, I kind of did the same thing where, not so much that I was going to count them, but as soon as he picked up the gun and he fired a shot, I went, oh, that's one. He's only got... But my first thought was, all they have to do is wait until he's used all 6 shots, and then he's not a danger anymore. Harry can just go up and deal with them. And then it clicked, and I went, oh, if they don't do a callback where Harry's like keeping count to the
Right.
first movie, because the first movie was a whole, was it 5 shots or only, or just 5 shots or 6, and all this confusion, I've lost count. If they don't do a callback to that when Harry's on the other end of it, they're idiots. And they kind of do. It's not a great reference, but it's a reference, so.
Yeah, they like you say, he says shit out of luck instead of out of luck punk, which kind of like it's a slant.
I feel like he should have phrased it that he's lucky, because in the first movie, he says to the guy in the other end, the guy he's pointing the gun at, he says, do you feel lucky, punk? I feel like the reference here should have been Harry saying that he's lucky, because he knows that the bullets
It literally needs to be like, you're out of bullets, step out of the fog holding the harpoon gun. Still would have been stupid there, but regardless, stepping out of the fog, and then he says, I'm feeling lucky. Boom, fire the shot.
Yeah.
That's all it needed to be.
Yeah, I'm feeling lucky. That makes me lucky, punk, or it means it's my lucky day, punk, or something. Whatever variation of that would have been perfect.
Yep.
And this is the end of the movie, because like the cops and all that and arrive, and he just walks off with Patricia Clarkson.
I will say they did have a good line of because this harpoon basically strung him up like a good foot off the ground.
Yeah, he's hanging on the door. Yeah.
Yeah, and so one of the cops comes up and says like, Harry, where's the killer? He's like, oh, he's just hanging around. And I'm like, all right, that's fine, good enough. But I don't think it's strong enough to be the final line of the movie, which it ended up being.
Well, it's not just it's the final line of the Dirty Harry franchise. Is just that.
Hanging around. Honestly, if they had said, I'll whatever version of I'm feeling lucky, and then never had him say another word to the end of the film, I think that would have been fine.
And it's kind of sad that it is the last one, because nothing about it feels. I mean, I know they're making references to the first one, and that feels kind of like a full circle thing. But nothing about this feels like, this feels like he's found a permanent love partner. Or it doesn't feel like he's finally going to retire. Or nothing in the plot or the character journey feels like the end of the story. It's just another one. It's just another adventure, and that's it. It's over.
I mean, I was thinking that at the beginning of the movie, again, he threatened that he was going to quit. And then they told him, all right, you can stay on homicide. I feel like there should have been 2 arcs going on. The first arc of, Sam Walker dealing with, I'm in the media, am I responsible for what the media shows, sort of thing. But then also have just this simultaneous arc for Harry of like being able to hang it up. Even if he doesn't end up with her, even if he doesn't do whatever, just being like, look, I'll do what I can from the media standpoint, but I'm still only one person. If this is getting to be too much for you, you can leave. Like, you don't have to hang around. You've done your time. And I feel like that should have been the arc that went on with Harry in this movie, so that at the end, even if they don't explicitly say that he's done, we can just kind of infer that, like, no, he is kind of walking away from the whole thing.
I mean,
because they had none of that, it's just another ending.
For one, like, we already had this ending at the end of the first movie where he tosses his badge, which, again, is the perfect ending to that movie, and you can kind of just consider the sequels fan fiction, by and large. But, like, he doesn't have to make the conscious choice. I think it just has to. It doesn't have to end with him saying, I'm done already, or I'm throwing the badge away, or I'm quitting now. It just has to end with the idea that he's accepted that his time is coming to a close. Like, he's at that age, he's pushing 60, his time is almost up.
With how the first movie ended.
Yes. But it was perfect then. It was perfect in the first movie. So basically what I'm saying is the first movie ended perfectly, and the sequels really don't need to exist. And so let's pause that there, because we're going to come back and just talk about the whole franchise in a minute after we've rated this.
Fair enough. Real quick, did want to bring up, did some more looking into it, and it turns out that not only Slash, but the entire Guns N' Roses band was in that scene.
Oh, really?
So
okay.
That was them.
Fair enough. They got their cameo.
Yep.
Congratulations. All right. Well, what are you rating the Deadpool?
Okay. So it's, if the 1 out of 10 rating, whatever it is, if I'm looking at it just in terms of its own film, regardless of it being a Dirty Harry film, just on its own, I think that it's enjoyable in a much different way than the other Dirty Harry films have been, but more so from just a silly perspective than a, hey, let's look at these deep meanings and themes.
You can't watch that car chase scene and not think it's utter silly nonsense.
Exactly.
It's nonsense.
But if you're willing to accept that it's silly nonsense, it makes it fun. And because of that, I did have fun with this movie. I think that it was a fun little action flick. It wasn't a serious cinema piece. It was just dumb fun. And because of that, I do have to give it, I think, a rating of, I'm going to say 6.5.
Okay, okay.
My other only critiques are that it did feel very sterilized. It did feel very, rushed out. It didn't feel like it was anything that a lot of effort was superbly put
No,
into.
it felt very generic. I think they've all felt more and more generic as we went through the franchise, and I would say I did have a lot of fun with a couple of key sequences and enjoyed how silly the car chase was. I do think it's kind of dull for a lot of the movie before that point. I didn't really ever really have much fun with the killer plot. Not even just comparing it to some of the better examples earlier in the franchise, but just on its own merit, I just thought it was a really kind of trite story. So between that and between just like it losing all of its personality effectively from the first Dirty Harry and just being this kind of, soulless final sequel, albeit with some funny scenes, I think I have to go with kind of a similar rating that I've done with some of the previous ones and probably just go with a 5. I'm probably going to split the difference, make it even, and just kind of, I think it's kind of sad as the last entry in a franchise if you care about the character, but there is some fun to be had in the kind of the so bad or so silly it's good elements, but that isn't consistent enough for me to give it an outright recommendation. And even if that was consistent, I would maybe even give it a lower rating and just say, oh, it's like a 3 out of 10, but it is a must-see 3 out of 10. That's not the case here.
Fair enough.
It's more just sort of middling with a couple of great silly scenes. So let's go. Right. So as far as making the cut goes, though, David, is it making the cut?
This is one I've been wrestling with. So again, I like it as a movie. I like it as a flick. Not cinema, but a flick. But it's not like a Dirty Harry film. This is the most it's gotten separated from, and that includes goddamn Meathead in that. And this is still the most separated from the Dirty Harry franchise that I have felt over the course of this whole thing. So if this is more a rating of, if I'm collecting Dirty Harry films, do I think that it needs to be here? I gotta say cut. I mean, I can't see this as necessary as you need this for the conclusion of the Dirty Harry. Like, nothing in here is required for that. So, yeah, I gotta say cut from the collection.
Yeah, I agree. Cut from the collection. It's just not bad enough to be cut your losses, but it's definitely a cut from your collection thing. And I think there's definitely been some interesting elements to some of these sequels, and I think Magnum Force is probably worth watching. But to kind of sum up the whole franchise at this point, I think this is very much one for me where I'm like, you only really kind of need to get the first one. The first one is the only one that feels important enough to actually want, unless you just like the character and you like the sequels enough to go for it. But I think this is definitely one for me that's the original stands out, and the sequels feel very separate in the sense that they feel very optional to go along with it. Whereas, other franchises where you get sequels that might be lesser than the original, but they're good enough that it's still kind of worth recommending as a series. This, I think, it's like, there's a very big delineation between that first one and then the rest.
I mean, I can't argue with that at all. I mean, yes, there are moments. Obviously, the fourth one has the "Make My Day" line.
Yeah.
And there are different things that pull all throughout that are recognizable, but yeah, if you're talking about what is actually something like, the first movie is what makes this franchise recognizable. It's what makes it something that stands with a little bit of prestige. Everything else honestly just detracts from that prestige with every additional entry. But the first one just had so much to it, so much just standing. It's the only thing that's keeping the entire thing afloat.
And maybe the other way to look at it is, if you're just recommending to someone Dirty Harry, are you saying you need to see Dirty Harry, or are you saying you need to see the Dirty Harry movies? I would say that you're only ever going to see the first one, right? You're not recommending the franchise, you're recommending Dirty Harry specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I do think this is the kind of franchise that, if somebody is very much into the character, more so than the themes itself, of the
Yeah.
first Dirty Harry, then I would say, yeah, go ahead, check out the rest, because the character stays true the whole way through. But if you're into this whole thing of like, oh, the black and white morality and the times are changing and stuff like that, the stuff that the first movie dealt with, that's gone. That's not going to come back again. So
yeah, and it's definitely not like there's definitely franchises with much worse sequels. Like, this is not the bottom of the barrel as far as that stuff goes, but certainly I don't think they're up to a standard that I think makes it a series recommendation rather than a single movie recommendation, where if you want to dive into the sequels, yeah, sure, but I'm never going to recommend and say you have to. Like, I would say watch Dirty Harry, and if you're asking me to give my stern recommendation, I would say watch Dirty Harry and then move on to something else. Move on to another movie or another franchise or whatever.
Yeah, I mean it's a solid movie, but as we've been saying, it's just a movie. As soon as you get into the other stuff, it is entirely up to the individual person whether it's worth continuing forward, with the slant being no.
Yeah, I would say more than solid. I would say it's a genuinely great like 70s movie that's, maybe the word classic gets thrown around too much, but at this point it kind of is. It's a classic.
I mean, anything that manages to spawn 4 movies from it does have something going on, especially when none of the following sequels are...
Excuse me, Michael Bay's Transformers has 4 sequels and a spin-off.
Okay, and the something it has is money.
I'm just saying, I'm just pointing that out there. That's not necessarily a barometer for quality.
Yeah, but I mean, there was Dirty Harry. Ostensibly, if you look at it, it didn't gross a massive amount. It didn't have a huge amount of star power outside of Clint Eastwood. It didn't have a bunch of lines that were super recognizable outside the "Make My Day" punk, or sorry, "Are You Feeling Lucky" punk. Nothing in it is specifically something that's like, this is remembered for this specifically. It's just overall a quality film. And that's what manages to get it to stand the test of time.
Yeah. Probably worth ranking the franchise.
Sure.
Especially it's only 5. It's not a hard thing to do. I mean, I think for both of us, Dirty Harry is number 1. There's no question of that.
Yes, absolutely.
We'd probably both put Magnum Force at number 2.
Yes.
Would you agree with that? Maybe after that's where it's going to get a little murky because we're sort of juggling the lessers.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, Dirty Harry, Magnum Force, of course, 1 and 2. I would then honestly jump to Deadpool for 3, just because while it doesn't deal with the themes, I think that it is still more fun. It is still something that if you are willing to turn your brain off for, it's worth it. And then after that, you get Enforcer and Sudden Impact in that order, because it was just it was a weird decline where it continued going down the entire time in terms of dealing with themes, but only the last film managed to pull up for comedy and just fun
for different reasons.
Yes.
I don't know, I might agree with Deadpool being 3, and it's really just down to the car scene just being silly enough that I might just, it's more memorable because of it. I might put Sudden Impact above Enforcer though. I think overall Sudden Impact, at least, and this was good, when we talked about those movies, the Enforcer, it felt like the villains were an afterthought. At least Sudden Impact felt like it had a focused story that it was actually telling.
Yeah,
so
that's
I think
fair.
Overall,
I think I just dislike the supporting characters in Sudden Impact
that's
more
fair.
than I dislike the villains in Enforcer.
That's fair, and I think, in fact, where was our dude who was in the other 4?
He wasn't in this one. This is the only film that he did not
That's
appear
shocking.
for.
I think his character in 3 was my favorite of his characters. To be fair, though, if I'm giving 3 a positive,
Oh yeah,
but I might say Sudden Impact just overall as a film, I think is more full than 3 was. So I'm going to put. So the only thing I'm changing for you is I am putting Sudden Impact slightly above the Enforcer, but honestly, like, there's a big gap between Dirty Harry and Magnum Force, and then there's another sort of reasonable gap between Magnum Force and Deadpool. But then the other 2 are like right next to it, honestly. Like, those 3, I think you could interchange depending on your taste.
Yeah,
quite easily. They're all in that kind of 5 out of 10-ish range, depending. So,
yep.
Yeah. So there you go. That is us coming to an end of our first theme, our first season, which is Dirty Harry. Our next season since we're getting into Christmas time, is going to be the Santa Claus trilogy.
Yes.
Starring Tim Allen. And the bonus episode on Patreon is going to be Christmas with the Cranks. So look forward to that in the next coming weeks. But we'll be here next week with our first film in the Santa Claus trilogy, which is the only one of the series that I've seen before when I was a kid. So we'll
see if it stands up.
We'll find out, I suppose. But yeah, that's what's coming next time. Obviously, I'll say my usual spiel here. Thank you very much for watching or listening. We appreciate it. You can, of course, support all the content by hitting the super thanks button on YouTube. Or, of course, you can over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support us on a regular basis. You do get a bonus episode every month at any tier, $3 and up. So go and have a look at that. And you get bonuses for the other shows that we have on Mail Fuzz Movies, the horror movie podcast Screams After Midnight, or the science fiction movie podcast, The Atomic Cinema Experiment. You can find me on those shows with other co-hosts talking about those movies. So if you haven't checked those out and you found this one first, go and have a look. Maybe you're into them. But otherwise, though, you can support us for free by simply commenting, letting us know what you think of the movie, sharing us out on Twitter and things like that, other social media places. You can get us on Twitter at Streams Midnight for the Mail Fuzz Movies Twitter. But otherwise, that is pretty much us. So, yeah. Thank you very much for joining us. Oh, I'll thank the Patreon producers. I always forget to do that part. Thank you very much to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, Board Now, Christopher Moy, David Brown, Al Treisman, and Alison M. Fordyce. They are some of our higher tiered patrons. Thank you very kindly. But thank you to everyone who does support the show. And hopefully you've had fun with this Dirty Harry saga. And we'll be starting with a shorter Christmas saga next week. And then following the Christmas saga, whatever won the first Patreon vote for a theme will be after that. We don't know what that winner is yet, but it will definitely be public by the time this goes out because the vote's already over by the time this goes out. But yeah, so that's the show. That's the collection cup. So
we're 5 episodes in. Do you finally have an ending phrase ready?
No. So
Fair enough.
I will just say keep watching movies, and this has been swell.